Airplanes were built to conquer distance, to shrink the world and bring people closer together. And while most of them spend their lives flying passengers or cargo from one airport to the next, not all of them follow that ordinary path. Some vanish without a trace, some sink beneath oceans or glaciers, and others crash in frozen wastelands or remote wilderness, preserved like time capsules waiting to be rediscovered. Over time, these forgotten machines turn into strange landmarks, silent reminders of the stories they once carried through the skies. In fact, some of them have ended up in places you'd never expect. When the Chernobyl nuclear reactor exploded on April 26, 1986, the Soviet authorities scrambled to contain a disaster unlike anything the world had seen before. The reactor's core was burning, releasing enormous amounts of radioactive material into the air, and traditional firefighting methods were useless. The Soviet military turned to their Mi-8 helicopters, rugged workhorses that could carry heavy loads and operate in harsh conditions. Crews were ordered to fly directly over the burning reactor and drop sand, boron, lead, and clay onto the exposed core in an attempt to smother the fire and absorb radiation. Several Mi-8s were heavily irradiated during these flights and had to be abandoned once their missions ended. They were left behind at a makeshift graveyard of machines near the Chernobyl site, along with fire trucks, armored vehicles, and bulldozers that had also been contaminated. Today, their corroding hulks remain where they were parked, slowly being reclaimed by rust and nature. The metal still holds traces of radiation, making them unsafe to touch. The Curtiss C-46 Commando, nicknamed Miss Piggy, saw military action in 1945 before becoming a cargo plane. Following its wartime service, this particular aircraft was later operated by Lam Air in Canada. While on a cargo flight in 1979, the Curtiss C-46 cargo plane met its fate northern Canada near Churchill, Manitoba. Miss Piggy suffered from an engine failure shortly after taking off from Churchill Airport and tried to turn back to base, but the old workhorse was overloaded that day, struggling to stay in the air before finally crashing just short of Churchill Airport. Somehow, the crew survived, but the plane didn't. It ended up perched awkwardly on the edge of a cliff, its wreck still sitting there like a frozen piece of aviation folklore. Tourists still hike out to see it, a bizarre monument to both bad luck and survival. In 1971, a Soviet Antonov An-12 transport aircraft set out on a mission to Antarctica. The rugged four-engine turboprop was designed for heavy cargo operations in some of the world's harshest environments, making it a natural choice for polar supply runs. But even the An-12 was not invincible against the unforgiving conditions of the southernmost continent. During its approach to an airfield near the Soviet research station, the aircraft ran into trouble. Due to poor visibility from fierce snowstorms, the plane crash-landed on the ice. Miraculously, the crew survived, though the An-12 itself was left behind. In Antarctica, recovery efforts are near impossible, and the costs of salvaging a damaged plane outweigh practicality. Instead, the aircraft was abandoned where it came to rest. Today, it remains one of the most remote and surreal aircraft wrecks in the world. The Antonov sits frozen in place, half buried in snow, its wings and engines stark against the endless white expanse. Few people have ever laid eyes on it, and fewer still have approached it closely. For explorers and aviation historians, it stands as a frozen monument to both the daring of Soviet polar aviation and the merciless power of Antarctica. From the icy north, we move to the scorching deserts of the UAE, where another relic lies forgotten. Built in 1975 in Uzbekistan, it began its career hauling freight for the USSR throughout the 1980s. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the aircraft transitioned into the service of the Russian Air Force. Not long after, the aging jet was sold to Airses, a private airline in Sharjah owned by the brother of Victor Bout, one of the world's most notorious arms dealers. The airline racked up over 140 aviation violations before being shut down. The plane was abandoned by the side of the E11 highway in Al-Quwain. The plane was dismantled and removed by authorities in late 2022. Not all wrecks sit on land, though. Some hide beneath the sea. A ship examining the bottom of the Kerch Strait in Cape Tuzla in preparation for the building of the Kerch Bridge discovered a crashed Soviet Il-2, a legendary ground attack plane from World War II. It went down in battle, sinking to the seabed where it remained untouched for decades. When the divers reached it, they found more than just rusted metal. The pilot's life jacket and his medal, the Order of the Red Banner, were still inside. The possessions belonged to Alexander Durov. It would seem he flew his final mission without a parachute. a haunting reminder that every wreck tells not just the story of a machine, but of the people who flew them. And then, there's the forest find. Take the dense forests of Russia. These woodlands are hiding secrets that go all the way back to the Soviet Union. Imagine wandering into the woods in Russia to pick mushrooms, only to stumble upon a fully intact Cold War bomber. That's exactly what happened when an Il-28U was rediscovered after being hidden for 40 years. The bomber still had its radar, electronics, even its power supply in place, as if the crew had just stepped out. It wasn't found by soldiers or explorers, but by accident. It looks like the mushroom picker was the first person to see it since it was left there. Nature had swallowed it, only to reveal it decades later in the most unusual way. Sometimes, the ice hides its own secrets. In 1944, a P-39 Airacobra sent to the Soviet Union under the World War II Lend-Lease program disappeared mid-flight. Lieutenant Ivan Baranovsky was forced to crash-land his P-39 on a frozen lake within the Arctic Circle. After being lost for 60 years, a Russian fisherman found the aircraft in the shallows of a lake near Murmansk in 2004. When it was finally pulled from the ice, restorers found flight logs, equipment, even unopened tins of American stew, the pilot's last meal, preserved by time. It was less like uncovering a wreck and more like opening a time capsule from the 1940s. It was eventually recovered and returned to the United States for restoration at the Niagara Aerospace Museum. Other stories are more tragic. In 2019, the football world was shaken by the tragic death of Emiliano Sala. After signing with Cardiff City, Sala boarded a Piper PA-46 Malibu that crashed in the English Channel off Alderney in the Channel Islands. It had been traveling from Nantes, France to Cardiff, Wales. Days later, after extensive search by a private investigation team, the wreckage was discovered intact on the seabed with its identification number visible to cameras on an underwater vehicle. Following the initial recovery of Emiliano Sala's body, attempts to salvage the rest of the wreckage were unsuccessful due to poor weather conditions. Then there's the Pegasus, a Lockheed Constellation C-121 that crash-landed near McMurdo Station in Antarctica on October 8, 1970. Caught in a brutal snowstorm and blizzard, the plane went down on the ice. The severe lack of visibility forced the plane to crash-land and skid. Miraculously, all 80 people on board survived, rescued against impossible odds. The aircraft remains there today, mostly buried under ice and snow, though its skin is in good condition, a testament to its survival in the harsh Antarctic environment. The nearby airstrip was named Pegasus Field in its honor. The wreck is a unique and popular site for visitors to the research stations, who often dig out parts of the plane to take photos or carve their names onto its exterior. Sometimes, even entire squadrons vanish. In 1942, during World War II, a group of U.S. fighters and bombers, 6 P-38 Lightnings and 2 B-17, were forced to land in Greenland after a severe blizzard and low fuel while en route to the United Kingdom. Though all the 25 crew members were rescued, the aircraft, known as the Lost Squadron, were eventually buried under hundreds of feet of ice and snow. Decades later, one of them, nicknamed Glacier Girl, was recovered and restored to flying condition, making its first flight in over 50 years in 2002. In 2018, a team led by Jim Salazar located another P-38, known as Echo. The team planned to set up a base camp and begin melting down to the aircraft, but severe weather forced them to postpone the main recovery effort until 2026. As of 2025, efforts are still underway to recover more aircraft from the Lost Squadron. But maybe no story is as legendary as the Swamp Ghost. This B-17 Flying Fortress was shot down during World War II and left to rot in a swamp. In 1942, Captain Frederick C. Eaton was flying his aircraft over Papua New Guinea and was caught in an aerial battle. Though he skillfully evaded his attackers, the plane eventually ran out of fuel, forcing him to ditch it in a remote, uninhabited region. Remarkably, he and his crew survived and then undertook an arduous 6-week journey through the harsh, remote jungle before reaching safety. For more than 30 years, it sat there untouched, sinking deeper into the marsh. In 1972, Australian soldiers on a training exercise spotted the remarkably preserved aircraft from a helicopter. The find was considered significant due to its intact condition and the fact that it still bore its battle scars. Finally salvaged in 2006, it was restored and now stands proudly in Hangar 79 at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum in Hawaii. From a forgotten wreck in the jungle to a polished icon, the Swamp Ghost became a symbol of survival and rediscovery. Perhaps the most famous abandoned plane of all is one we still haven't found: Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. A Boeing 777 carrying 239 people during a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing vanished on the 8th of March 2014 without a trace. Theories swirl around. Did it crash in the Indian Ocean? Did it veer into the Cambodian jungle? Was it something darker? It is widely considered one of the greatest and most baffling mysteries in aviation history. The main body of the aircraft has never been found, though debris from it has washed up in the Western Indian Ocean. Unlike the other stories, MH370 isn't just about history, it's about the present. It's a wound that still hasn't healed, a riddle with no answer. And that wraps up our countdown of incredible abandoned planes. Each one carries more than just metal and engines. They hold stories of survival, mystery, and the passage of time. Some became legends, others quietly faded into the landscape, but all remind us that aviation history doesn't always end in the skies. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones left behind on the ground, waiting for us to discover them.